everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today I'm going to bring you my spoiler-free review of Kings of the Wyld, written by Nicholas Eames. I shuffled around my reviews because I just finished this book up on... what day is it? I'm filming on Sunday. I finished this up on Friday night, and I have to talk about it now. Like, I couldn't wait until I got some of my other reviews done. This book I have to talk about now. This is one of the books that were nominated for the Best Debut category in the Booktube SFF Awards, and I loved every second of this book, so I needed to review it right off the bat. This is a story about a group of mercenaries who find themselves no longer in the prime of their life. They're aging. They're scattered throughout the kingdom and just kind of living their life, doing their own thing. Our main character, his name is Clay Cooper. He is kind of reflecting on some of these young guys coming up who want to be soldiers, who want to be mercenaries, and they're just in awe of all the stories from when he was a young mercenary himself in this legendary band of mercenaries called Saga, when he comes home to find one of his bandmates, Gabriel, visibly upset, visibly shaken up because his daughter has gone missing. She's gone into the wild, into the Heartwyld. The kingdom knows that the area that she has gone to is under siege and under attack, and Gabriel has come to Clay Cooper for help because he wants to get the band back together to go rescue his daughter. Once we meet Gabriel, things set off into motion very quickly. This story is not lacking in pacing at all. It is very quick moving. There's something new that happens in each and every chapter. So of course our story takes off from there. Of course, like all my reviews, I want to talk about the world building first. What I liked the most about the world building in Kings of the Wyld is things are set up very quickly, but as we reflect through Clay Cooper's thoughts as he's going through all these different adventures, we get different bits and pieces of their past, of what things are like now, and it's a very easy world to kind of just get involved in. It's a riff on all the fantasy things that you've ever encountered before, but turned on its head in a very humorous way, in a very casual way, in a very heartfelt way. So one of the best things about the world building is the treatment of a mercenary band, because it takes a lot of influence, a lot of tongue-in-cheek influence on the old classic rock bands, and how people always talk about and reminisce how the rock bands were, the classic rock bands of the 80s and the 70s were some of the greatest rock bands, the greatest era of music that you'll ever encounter. And so the way that they treat these old mercenary bands, and people just lose their mind over the stories, it's a really easy parallel to draw on. And so as you're reading, you can kind of formulate what these guys are looking like, how the people treat them when they encounter them. And that just made it a really fun, joyful experience to read about and just kind of draw those parallels as well. So the next I want to talk about is the characters. The main character, Clay Cooper, is our main narrator. It's told from his point of view. We learn about all of the bandmates from Clay's perspective. We learn about all the towns from his perspective. We learn about all of their enemies and all the creatures from his perspective. So he's a very funny guy. It's not body humor, but it's guy humor. It's just, you know, we're getting all the guys back together sort of thing. But he's very driven by his family. He's a very heartwarming kind of guy. And the thing that I appreciated most about reading from Clay Cooper's perspective and from an older person's perspective is this isn't a story about young chosen ones coming together and defeating evil. This is a story about a ragtag group of old washed up men who are dealing with their wives and their children back home. They're dealing with relationships that they've had their whole life and their young life, and the brotherhood that they shared while they were younger, and does that still translate to when they're older and can no longer do some of the same things that they used to be able to do. One of the things that happens to Clay Cooper is just kind of this question of, who are you, the man or the monster? Which one will prevail? Do you want to be this old reckless man that you used to be? Or are you the father that is helping out another father? There's a lot of reflection that happens because he's an older character, and we get to see a lot of different pieces of the men that way, and I appreciated that. So of course we have Clay Cooper. Then we have Gabriel, who is the man whose daughter has gone missing. He is the front man. Then there's the wizard named Moog. Moog is just such a character. His husband passed away from the rot, which is this disease that is incurable, so he spent his whole life trying to search for a cure for the rot. And some of the cures that he comes up with, some of the things that he does as a part of the group, he's just very eclectic. He reminded me of like if Albus Dumbledore was like on shrooms the whole time, where nobody took Albus Dumbledore seriously. That's how I feel about Moog. And I loved him. He was so much fun. There was Matrick, or Maddie. He is actually the king of this whole realm, and he is their friend, and he turned into a fat sloppy drunk. And he used to be kind of like the drummer of their band. He has 2 knives that he wields. He's extremely close to Moog. He's another one of those heartwarming guys that has been trying to do the right thing for the kingdom, but people haven't been doing right to him, and he's a wanted man throughout this whole thing. Then there's Ganelin, who is this super great warrior fighter from the south, from a completely different region, and then that makes up their band. They do have various different creatures that they encounter. They have a bard that they encounter. They have a couple villains in this story. There's the main Druin, which I kind of took to be like an elvish race, big bad guy. There's a smaller bookie bad guy. And then there is Rose, who is Gabe's daughter. We don't get to spend a lot of time with her, but there is an entire book coming up. If I could say one thing about the cast of characters, it was just, you know, you get the band of brothers, you get brotherhood, but you get a lot of heart from them as well. So overall, I recommend this book to anyone who is interested in fantasy but doesn't want to get bogged down in like super classical fantasy, someone that likes something that's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, something that likes a lot of fast-paced action, because let me tell you, something new happens in each and every chapter. One of the big messages that I took away from this book, it talked about brotherhood, and it talked about what do you do when you're no longer in the prime of your life, when you're on the waning side of your life, and you have settled in and you've put your roots down. Can you truly come back from that? Do you want to come back from that? It does also touch a little bit, I felt, on some post-traumatic stress. There were some moments in here that really reminded me of a group of veterans, military veterans in particular. Some of the dark humor that you might need to cope with the monstrosities that you've seen in your life, but also those thoughts and those fears that come back, maybe some of those nightmares that you've had from the horrors that you've seen. There were a lot of monstrosities that they have committed in their life, and there were a lot of monstrosities that they have seen in their life, but the scariest thing of all to each and every one of them were their own personal demons and how did they confront them. I just really enjoyed this. I think it's a really great start to the Booktube SFF Awards. This was the first book that I've read that has been nominated this year, and I thought it was an amazing read. It was 4 out of 5 stars for me, and I hope you enjoyed this book as well. So I hope you've enjoyed my spoiler-free review of Kings of the Wyld, written by Nicholas Ames. Like I said, 4 out of 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and if you pick it up, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Otherwise, you can also find me on my social media, so that way you know what I'm talking about, because I did tweet out this gif of Anchorman where he says he's in a glass case of emotion, and that's how I felt about the epilogue. Nicholas Ames did actually retweet that, so I felt pretty good about that. So you can find me on Twitter or Instagram if those are your social media platforms of choice. It's at What Cast Read. It's the same as this channel, or you can also find me on Goodreads. That link will always be down below. Otherwise, you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.